Hi everyone, my name's Omar, and want to take a quick second to acknowledge that we are all probably on colonized indigenous land, and currently I sit in the SLN Nation in the Salinas Valley, and so I want to acknowledge that, acknowledge that there's people that were here before me. And so my name's Omar, and I am the executive director for Xinampa, community biolab based in Salinas. And wanted to bring this panel together. I have some beautiful people here that are going to be talking here in this topic. And so I wanted to do a quick introduction. Before I start the introduction, I want to start with some gifts and baggages, something that we do here in Salinas with the work that I do here with Chago. And so gifts is something you're grateful for. Baggages is something you want to let go or need help and support to carry through. And the gift that I have for myself is I'm lucky to be around my family, and cargas y regalos is what we like to call it. And so yeah, my gift is I like to be around my family. I have my family here, and I get to see them often. Some baggage is, well, we're in COVID and I don't get to see them as often as I like, even though they're in the same city that I live in. So yeah, with that said, I want to go ahead and introduce Mary, Mary Pulgar. She's a senior biology student that's currently working in a community outreach project that bridges conservations of wild species with the development of marginalized rural communities in Ecuador. And I don't know if you want to do some cargas y regalos, Mary, really quickly.
Some regalos gonna be my motivation to work with together to meet you all. Cargas, well, my fear of talking out here.
Thank you. Yeah, and then we also have Onye here. Onye is a strategic organizer at Counterculture Labs and transdisciplinary, classically trained in art, chemistry, and material science. His work and interests focus on learning from the world around us, ancestral knowledge, and bleeding edge research to apply concepts for build and design better and smarter. And Onye, you want to share us quickly gifts and baggages for us?
Sure. Hi, everyone. A gift. I'm in the Bay Area in Oakland. Smoke-free air. It's clean air. That's a big gift right now. Seems strange, but yeah, that's a big gift. Baggage baggage. Trying to figure out housing, like housing struggles in COVID. That's. You're muted.
Here in the West Coast, sorry, I was muted. Here in the West Coast, we're all grateful for that clean air right now. So thank you for that. And next up, we have Elia, and she's from Honolulu, has 20 years experience working on local, national, and global conservation issues. She spent the last 6 years at Hawaii's Department of Land and Natural Resources, providing leadership direction on a range of marine resource management issues. She's worked in the U.S. Congress developing national environmental policy, at the Pew Charitable Trust managing a campaign focused on strengthening U.S. international environmental policy. And if you want to go ahead and share quickly some gifts and baggages for us.
Sure. Aloha, everyone. I guess building off of what I've heard, I am very grateful. I actually went on a hike this morning before joining this panel, so that felt like a gift, and also getting to be with my family. And I guess baggage is being far from a lot of people I love and not knowing when we will get to be in the same space again.
Likewise. Very great. Thank you for that. And last but not least, we have Chago here, Chago Juarez, co-founder of Baktun 12, a community theater and media organization based in East Salinas. Through the Baktun 12 Civic Action Teatro initiative, he has supported the development of short theater pieces, actos that directly engage with residents as primary storytellers in order to activate resident power and voices. And Chago, you know this process well enough, so go ahead.
So thank you, Omar, and thank you, everybody. So yeah, my carga is the this year, 2020, ready to let that go. And my gift is to be in this space. This is a new space for me myself. For folks that are doing this work, and the connection I have with Omar and Corinne I'm really grateful for, and really grateful to be in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chago. Thank you. So yeah, this panel is set up more of a conversational style. I want it to be very much a discussion and just hear from everyone. And so I'm going to pose a question to the panelists, and let's just kind of riff like we were talking about a lot earlier. So the question is, how might we imagine a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive future bioeconomy? And also start with that, and then we can kind of bleed into the other one. So I don't know if maybe Chago, let's start with you.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, how might we be? Rephrase it one more time, please. I just want to get it right.
Yeah. How might we imagine a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive future bioeconomy?
Well, living in the Salinas Valley, this valley produces about, the numbers that kind of fluctuate depending on who you speak to, like over $10 billion a year in terms of the revenue that it gains from the ag, the produce that comes from this valley and then is distributed pretty much throughout the world. And so, I grew up, my father was a bracero, came with the bracero program. Don't know how many of y'all are familiar with this, but this was basically the work program that replaced the workforce that went off to fight in World War II. The program was only supposed to last till about 1945, till the end of World War II. And apparently my father came in 1951. The program continued to 1964. It's by design, right? That the architects of our economy, of our political systems, they were able to they struck it big when they discovered or they were able to maneuver labor that came from the South, and during a time where the laws and the policies made it so that you couldn't organize farm labor. There were laws that were in place. Unions are strong in this country. This is like union towns all throughout this nation. But it was the farm laborer that was left out, and it wasn't until like after several tragedies that took place here in this valley, just in this valley alone, that there was the so-called bracero program came to an end, and that was like 63. About 64, 65 was when the UFW, y'all, if you're familiar with Cesar Chavez and his legacy and the history of the United Farm Workers, that's when it started popping off, and it wasn't like the bracero program really ever ended. We have different types of programs since that made it so that this nation would be able to profit off of the labor that came from Mexico.
And Carla, do you see that program, like the bracero program, created a more inclusive, right? And I want to kind of open this up, right, to Onye and Maria and Elia, right? Like, a program like that, do you think it created a more inclusive environment? And how do you see something like that for biotechnology or biodesign, biomanufacturing? Do you see programs like that maybe not bringing in immigrants like the bracero program did, but maybe bringing in people from different classes, racial background, ethnic backgrounds, people
from different classes and backgrounds and different relationships to the land. Mm-hmm. Our communities are out here, they're the closest to the land on a daily basis, and so there's something to be said about that. It's so big, yet something that we apply very little attention to, that, and the fact that an industry like the ag industry here, and the impending ag tech industry is preparing to rev itself up here because we're only an hour south of Silicon Valley. You know, what does that exchange look like between the earth and those who are profiting off of it? You know, everything that we're pulling from it, but what are we giving back? So
Yeah.
this sets it for me.
And Chago, I think you touch on an interesting point, like two interesting points. One being, I do think we need to look to the past in order to start to imagine futures and start to get ideas of how we can build these futures. And the second one is this connection to the land of, in the current system, there are different kind of programs that bring in people who can help in these gaps that we have with the connection to the land, or being intimately familiar with how to do this at scale or do this in a certain way. And in the future, I think if we look throughout history, the people who are most familiar with things like working with the land, or most familiar with the production process, are the ones who probably have the most insight into give towards like innovative like developments. Right? Like they see the problems, they deal with the problems, and they come up with their own solutions, kind of at a small scale. And I think, just to jump back to the history, I think we need to go back before the Industrial Revolution to really start to think about what the future may look like. We kind of, you know, Industrial Revolution happened, and there's this centralization of production, centralization of like having factories and whatnot, and of power as well. And biotech, I think, is really powerful in that way, especially as it's starting to mature, of being cheaper, faster, smaller. We're now able to decentralize these things again. So I think that's interesting in getting more people engaged and more people to solve their local problems. And I want to give other people a chance to speak, but that's just kind of to riff off of what you were saying, Chago. Those are some interesting points.
Elia.
Yeah, building on all of that, you know, here in Hawaii, we've seen a huge revitalization in the native Hawaiian language, Olelo Hawaii, the culture, and that idea of, and sort of as part of that, what we've seen is a lot of a big move towards community-based management. So different local communities really taking ownership of, you know, in the management of their own places, to the point that the state has actually, you know, recognized that sort of in our legislature. And so that's been like a really tremendous, exciting way to really build on this, you know, hundreds, thousands of years of indigenous knowledge, and like bring that back into the present time. And it is not without its challenges, but that's been kind of one of the most amazing sort of movements. When I'm no longer at our Department of Land and Natural Resources, but it was something I was very involved with when I was there. And then the organization I work for now, Kupu, works a lot with young people who are in the natural resources arena. And recently I've been working with our public schools, and sort of recognizing there's a huge gap that a lot of the kids in these schools are not learning about natural resources. It's sort of very limited to agriculture, and if they even have that. And so we've really been in this last year making a push to bring this back in into the schools and make that, you know, one of the key opportunities, not having it buried sort of at the end of a long list of things that maybe you might learn about. I mean, again, we live in Hawaii. We are like, you can't get any more like oceans, mountains, you know, complete, you know, the most isolated archipelago in the world. So I think for us at the organization I work for, that is now kind of the big push that I'm focused on, and we're focused on, or a piece of it is this working with our public schools to make it, you know, much more relevant. And we even had to have a fight actually as we were creating kind of a career pathway in natural resources to say the language that you need is the Hawaiian language. Like, we are in Hawaii, and if you want to be effective at managing our natural resources, this is the language you need to be recommending to your kids. And it was like, they really struggled to get that. I mean, they eventually sort of bought onto it, but that was kind of one of those, oh wow, okay, we have a lot of work to do here still, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to pass it over to Mary as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I really like this part of community engagement. I'm gonna put this picture of this community I work with, that it's a marginalized rural community located at the north of Ecuador in the highlands. Well, this community is really poor, has terrible access roads, and has around 1,500 of inhabitants. That includes peasants, that includes also Afro-Ecuadorian people and indigenous people. But there is a kind of selfish sense that we have detected here, that because this community survives day to day from agriculture and also from livestock. But in the case of agriculture, each people just work in their own lands and just see their own benefit. And there is the case that since this part of these roads are terrible, to be honest, they have some problems to get these products into the capital city, the markets of the capital city. And in this case, sometimes they just couldn't do it and just use it as organic compost. But how see you in your future economy as proposed is all these people working together, reaching community cohesion, uh, in order that all of their can acquire new technologies to involve all of this in their processes, but we as academy be the catalyst of their development, in which every people, every piece, and I don't know, to feel part of this community, have this sense of community, and everyone unites together toward all of them the same objective. And then, for instance, offering new products, or offering, I don't know, new profitable economy that it's based on the solidarity and in a cooperative economy. I think this part very important, the community cohesion. So for all of them working together.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it bleeds perfectly into the next like section of the question. Like, what role do community bio labs play in democratizing STEAM, ushering in economic justice for Black, Indigenous, people of color communities that are left out of these conversations revolving around the new technologies and new industries? Like, what role do we see our facilities or our bio labs playing in that economic justice that we would hope to strive for these communities? And I'll pass it over I'll start with Elia, if you want to start with that.
Sure. So I run a program called the Hawaii Youth Sustainability Challenge. And what we do is we basically challenge kids sort of in two different ways. One, to come up with their solutions to the challenges they identify in their schools or communities, the conservation, sustainability challenges. And then also this year, for the first time, we're having them tackle challenges that have come up from community partners. And I think that's something we're always, so I guess I would start by saying, I don't know that I have the exact answer, because it's something we're always wrestling with, is who are the applicants we're getting? What is the outreach we're doing? How are we making sure that, the kids that are having, that we're really getting a broad participation and input from all different kinds of kids. And I've actually been sort of pleasantly surprised by we've gotten from different islands, from lots of public schools, also some private and charter schools. So it's gone better overall than I sometimes expected, but it is sort of one of those concerns, is that you can make these opportunities available. It's really an opportunity for them to do their own innovation, but how do you make sure they even know about these opportunities in the first place? What are those inroads? And so, I mean, that's something I would actually be really curious to hear more about from others, is that how do you, it may be there for anyone, but how do you make sure they know about it and everyone knows about it and has access to it? And how do we kind of support and promote that? So maybe more of a question than an answer.
No, that's perfect. I think Mary, Onye, Chago, if you want to kind of answer that question or give your own thoughts to.
I could hop in and just kind of give my 2 cents on this. I come from a very different background. I'm not necessarily in community organizing. I come from more of an R&D and commercialization background, of like trying to make an impact through products and production. And for me, the community labs I think they're an interesting kind of like gateway of allowing a space where people, I can imagine in Salinas, if you wanted to work on your own ag tech project where you can go and actually have access to the tools to start to work on that. I don't think we're there yet where things are cheap enough where we can just like give all the tools out to everyone. But I think right now that, you know, maybe the community labs can act as sort of like a library of sorts, of being an access point until things continue to get cheaper and cheaper or more accessible. And then things start to change. Maybe it becomes more of an educational thing of how do you use the tools that you have access to now. That's just kind of something that I see.
Cool. Mary, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, sorry. In this part of biolabs, to make accessible in our case, we will work with some universities, will join in this part of the academia to democratize their knowledge, to working together. But in my case, when I think in biolabs, it just came to my mind when we were working with these inventories of biodiversity. And people just every day just ask us about the medicinal properties of the flora. And at the end of the day, they just ended up teaching us. And it's a part of democratizing our knowledge, but also working together with their knowledge, also they're democratizing, and we learning from them. And then, but knowing how to use it, how to make this in their own benefit, for instance, let's think about it. We work in a community lab to analyze these properties that they are really interested, for instance, in these chemical properties and analysis, chemical analysis, and so on and so forth. But then promoting a kind of, I don't know, a community entrepreneurship, community startup in which, for instance, a tea factory that would make them all this community to progress, to work together, and to reach their goal of improving their quality of life.
Yeah, mutual beneficial exchange. I think that's key, right? And like Chago, something that Chago and I have been working on in Xinampa is that mutually beneficial exchange and collaboration outside of just like biology and like hard STEAM networks. And so maybe Chago can kind of speak to that as well.
The story, right? The power of the story, the excitement, you know, the audience. We're envisioning the children of our farm workers here, you know, stepping into these roles, into these positions, into these jobs, into a whole new workforce, you know, and allowing them to identify their own culture, their own historical legacy, and their role in this, right? To really recognize it in a narrative and celebrate it, you know, and also celebrate amongst their own community and have that to ultimately inform these industries, right? Or these forces, these forces that are, I mean, we're shifting, this changing. We're feeling these changes now. And, you know, Omar and I, we have these conversations, you know, of how gentrification is just, you know, we're feeling it all over the place. So how can the story of this moment that we're living in now really empower not just us, you know, the choir, but, you know, our future and the next 7 generations to come.
Yeah, definitely. And something that, you know, a question that came up today from myself that through the inspiration of all the different talks from earlier this morning and today is, you know, how do we see biolabs as like hubs for community organizing, and advocacy and engaging with the civic engagement of our community and what's going on socially and politically outside the world, right? Because that all affects the outcomes of what we're trying to do. And do we see that the biolabs as that role, right? As filling in that role? Mary, do you want to jump in on that a little bit?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. It's so like, how do we see biolabs and community biolab spaces as hubs for community engagement outside of just community bio, but into political and social movements to engage the community and advocating for diversity and inclusion outside of just our own space, but in a broader sense in the society.
Well, I see in this part of we as scientists, for to say that, educating and training the people and making them part of all of this knowledge, letting them know how to all of these processes starts, how this principle, what's the information that can be obtained, how to take advantage of them. But even it could be a part of the make this, as I said, community cohesion to make all of us to be journeying together, and sometimes even these external groups can be this part of that exploited, that is community divisions, and we can just make this sense of community to all of them working together for the benefit. Just that's my idea.
Feel free, anyone who wants to chime in, Onye or Elia or Chago.
Sure, yeah, I think like for what we're trying to do with the Hawaii Sustainability Challenge, I mean, I think I absolutely, right, anytime you are convening or doing anything, it's an opportunity to be transformative in different ways. And so, you know, we're through that program, we're trying to give space for innovation for these kids to come with their solutions, but we're also, and they get funding to support this, but what we're also trying to do is bring in some different trainings where they can start to think about things like entrepreneurship, but also social entrepreneurship. And some of the kinds of innovations we support are not just necessarily, you know, products. And some of them are products, but some of them are also advocacy efforts. So I think to the extent possible, we are trying to sort of do and build what you're talking about to make it, you know, a space that, and I don't think we've been totally successful yet, but as we kind of keep iterating, and we've done this for a few years now, we keep trying to bring in new pieces that create that space, create more of a cohort feel, create a space for collaboration, learning, dialogue, pushing, kind of pushing boundaries, and to start to think about some of these issues around diversity and inclusion as well.
Yeah, something that I think about is culture, not necessarily from like a ancestral perspective, but in the sense of like doing things in different ways and having different perspectives of looking at something. And I think that's something that community biology in the labs particular could help facilitate, of allowing regions to start to develop, you know, their own perspectives, their own approaches to problems, let's say, or to creating whatever that may be for that local environment.
Definitely. Chago.
And again, it's the excitement, right? How you know, getting our youngsters excited about this, where that inspiration, the opportunity to inspire, you know, the adventure of what this is. I get lost in this, you know, and I see that future where our youngsters here are able to tap into these different modes that are using our resources, or using our natural resources in order to really achieve sustainability. And it's on our communal terms, you know, it's not dictated by outside profit-driven forces, you know, but it's all in narrative, right? Who's controlling these stories, you know? Because again, you know, if we look at the story of the three sisters, that is an indigenous story, you know. This is what informs the diet of this hemisphere, you know, and then, you know, pretty much, you know, has informed the rest of the world, right? Our companion, how are these organisms that we thrive and we survive off of, you know, how they live in community, and what we as humans, how we as humans, the story of how we as humans can learn from that and that exchange. Yeah, it seems it could go far out. You know, I mean, these kids out here, you know, it's a faster culture. Obviously, it gets faster and faster with social media. You know, a lot of flash over substance. But that's our job. That is our job, to provide the substance.
Chago, I'm curious if you could expand a little bit more. I know you work with a lot of kids, and what are they excited about, you know, in being a part of this movement and kind of seeing it all happen around them?
I mean, I can tell you right now, it is really challenging, because given the digital divide and the impact that COVID is having on their immediate families and our immediate communities, there is that stress. So, you know, if they get to experience it, or to see it, or see themselves in it, you know, and that's our job as storytellers. That we're shooting to be as sincere and as authentic as possible, and it's I don't want to say simplified or dumbed down, but there's that magic, the magic of the simplicity, right? Explain it to me like I'm a kindergartner, right? And once we get to that place, then we can communicate it even farther out.
That's at least in the professorial terms, they say, like, you know, that's when you truly know something, when you can explain it to a kindergartner or something.
And you're also make me, oh, sorry.
Go for it. I was going to open it up for questions, but go for it.
I was just going to say, it just also makes me think about like the importance of voice, sort of everything that you're saying, and especially giving these young people that voice. And so one of the other things that we always do is we have every year here, we have a Hawaii Conservation Conference, which is sort of a gathering. This year it was virtual from across the state. And we always pick, you know, we end up having 3 to 6 student teams who present at that conference their work, and they're presenting at the same level of, you know, these PhD professional adults, you know, practitioners. And that's been kind of an amazing thing to see, to have them put on the same sort of level, and so that they start to see that what they're doing, what they're saying, what they're thinking actually matters, and that there are adults coming to their sessions to actually hear what they have to say. So I wanted to just kind of echo sort of some of what you're saying about how important I think that story and that voice is for kids.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah. I want to open it, take a quick maybe a question or two from the audience, the virtual audience that we have here. I believe we have the ability to, they have the ability to unmute themselves. So if you have a question, thought, statement, anything, just want to contribute to the conversation, feel free.
I'm going to just say that, yeah, it's been such a joy to hear you all interact and talk with each other. It's such a diverse group. And Omar, I want to thank you so much for bringing this panel together, because everyone here on this panel has such interesting things to say and insights. And then hearing you ask each other questions and riff off each other, this has been such a joy and such a great way to end today's panel. So thank you all so much. I just, as a spectator, like, this is joy. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Corinne. Another question? I don't know if we have time for another question. What's the time?
We're a few minutes over, but we've let you guys eat into the wrap-up time a little bit.
Okay.
So if you want to take like one more question, if anybody has one, and then we can move into wrap-up. I think we're all tired out, especially those of us.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been in since the beginning, and anybody who's an organizer, you know, the West Coast organizers, we got up at 5 in the morning.
I'm wondering, we have a team here. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have anything to share, Emily? You've heard Elia and Chago talk about youth.
I don't know. It was just, yeah, it was really neat to hear. Yeah, I like Elia putting emphasis on like presenting and social entrepreneurship, because through a lot of the stuff I've done, I think one of like the best, I don't know, skills I've learned is like presenting. I think it's like really important. I mean, even for school, it's really helpful too.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's it. We can
Okay.
wrap up.
No, I'm gonna have you stay, Omar. You and I think, 'cause I'm supposed to do the wrap up, but I would rather, let's do it as a tag team. So I'd love, you've been in this block, right? This
Mhm.
whole time. I'm wondering if you would want to kind of help summarize what some of your takeaways are, and then I'll give you a few of mine, and maybe Maria would like to share some of hers too. So as organizers. So
Yeah.
Omar, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah. Some of my thoughts. I think it was beautiful to see some of the parallels, or I guess not parallels, but the emphasis on bringing in indigenous communities and knowledge and sharing across cultures and across people, and including that in the movement. And this is very early on I feel, this is the fourth summit. This is very early on in this movement, and including that such an early stage is it warms my heart, because something that Chago and Corinne and everyone here in Salinas talk about as well is like what happened with Silicon Valley, and these voices were included in that boom, and look what happened: displacement and lack of economic justice and mobility for a large groups of communities in the valley. And so having these voices here early on and emphasizing those voices to be included early on in the early stages has been just heartwarming, and can shows that it's really at the root of this movement.
Thank you, Omar. I'm going to share a few thoughts, and then Maria, it'd be awesome if you could wrap this up. So it's been such a pleasure to be part of this track. I think it's one of the most important tracks here, or in my mind, it's the most important one actually, because we, as Omar said, we're at the beginning of this, and we need to have all voices in this conversation, and we need to look at our labs, as communities, as being in communion with each other, being in communion with our ancestors, being in communion with the organisms we work with. And so much of that is storytelling. So I'm so grateful that Xago's here, that we have someone that's from the storytelling world, because that is really core to anything when we're talking about indigenous knowledge, cultural knowledge sharing, and elevating the science and cultural practice, and expanding what our notion of science is, and expanding where it's done and who does it. So I just want to elevate the idea of story. I've heard that throughout the tracks, through this track session, and the idea of co-creation two-way, and lastly, going the pace of trust, going the speed of trust with communities. That's very important when we're talking about collaborating. We can't go into play. Omar, you asked us in another panel. This is like one of the most important things. Is like we have to be co-collaborators. We have to build relationships that are anchored in what communities are interested in, not in the latest tech fad or tool. It's really what do they want to drive. And Benno brought this up earlier. I love the slide you had of people using their local materials to explore their local issues. And I think that's the core of it. Just that one image you had of the women holding up the boxes and that prototype they made, and then later on presenting. That was so beautiful, Benno. I know you got your screen off, maybe, but I really appreciate that. That's going to stick with me. The idea of using materials that have stories to create solutions that anchor into stories today. So I want to thank everyone for being here and sharing. I'm going to hand it off to Maria.
No, I think, I, again, for me and some of the other organizers, and David especially, BioSummit is a bit like, what's your favorite kid? So all the tracks have to play with each other, but if any are missing, it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? So diversity and inclusion is something that needs to be a core value. It is something we talk about. One of the core tenets we talk a lot about in BioSummit in these labs is democratizing biotechnology, democratizing science. What does that really mean? It means making it accessible to everybody. And so when we're making it accessible, that means we need to have a deeper conversation about diversity and inclusion. And that means, you know, starting out the conversation like we started out this afternoon with, what is diversity? What does diversity mean? What does inclusion mean? Who's being included? When we talk about who's been left out, one of the largest gaping holes is our indigenous communities around the world have been marginalized, have been mistreated, and they have so much knowledge we need, but we should make sure that those exchanges are equitable. And they haven't been up till now. In addition, you know, I think that we've got a lot to do in our own communities, just to reflect, how are we doing? What are we doing? I think, you know, even the best of our communities, we need to be thinking, how do we go in? How do we approach these questions, and just being very, very thoughtful about them. So I hope that everybody has some thoughtful reflections on the afternoon or morning or late evening, whatever time zone it might be for you. And I hope that, you know, you really start to center the idea in storytelling, in values, and in a real idea of, how do we lift up our marginalized voices? How do we make sure whatever the voices in our community are, that we're thinking about how are we including them? So whether they're indigenous and acknowledging the lands that we're standing on, whether it is our LGBTQ representation, whether it's our gender representation with women in STEM, whatever our issues are, make sure that we're pulling people up with us and not stepping on them to get ahead.